You know, I really love when game franchises cross over into different genres. It gives players the chance to try something they may never have thought they'd be interested in, a chance just to experience the next entry of said series. I'm a massive Devil May Cry fan. For months on end, I haven't gone a week without playing one of these games at least once. It's one of my favorite franchises, and it became that in such a short period of time. I even made a video about what I'd like to see in Devil May Cry 5 that you can check out. But case in point, I wouldn't have tried Devil May Cry if it wasn't for my first playthrough of Platinum Games' Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, released on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Steam in the year 2013. Originally, Kojima Productions was going to work on this game under the title of Metal Gear Solid Rising, a game about Raiden with a heavy focus on sword combat, and in particular the incredibly innovative Blade mode, where Raiden can freely cut through anything, whether it be wood, steel, or concrete. The game was going to be set in between the events of Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 4, detailing how Raiden rescued Sonny from the Patriots. However, Kojima Productions decided that they should outsource the game to Platinum Games to focus on other projects. PT is of course famous for works in the action genre like the Bayonetta series or the Wonderful 101, so they were perfect for the job of completing the vision Koji Pro had in mind. Thus, Metal Gear Rising was born. I'm actually glad this happened, since my last two videos have shown that the Metal Gear series is on a spiral of devolution, with all that starting in Third Son from MGS4. Point being that the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid Rising might have been great, but the story was probably gonna suck. This leads me to an entirely different tangent though. I don't know why outsourcing games to different companies has to be something that usually ends poorly. I don't recall where I originally heard this point, but it was a great one. When a different developer takes the reins of a project, you want to see what it is that they can bring to the table that the original developers couldn't do. This should be what all new devs strive for. Definitely leave your fingerprint as a studio, all the while maintaining consistency with the original vision that the older devs had. Games like Sly 4 or Batman Arkham Origins suffer from this since they were trying way too hard to imitate the older games and thus had no identity of their own, and at the same time they got all the details wrong. We've even seen this before in the retrospective with the Twin Snakes. I mean, I love the game, but it still suffered from this fundamental issue. After something like Peace Walker, I'm in the mood for a breath of fresh air, so let's hope that Metal Gear Rising Revengeance can scratch that itch. To start, Platinum Games changed when the game was going to take place. Metal Gear Rising takes place in 2018, 54 years after Naked Snake kills the boss, 23 years after Solid Snake enters Outer Heaven, and most importantly, it's been 4 years since Snake, Otacon, Raiden, and all the others finally defeated Liquid Ocelot, destroyed the Patriot AI, taking SOP with it. At the time of writing, Metal Gear Rising is the very last game in the timeline, and this was a great call. The creativity of Peace Walker was held back by taking place in the 1970s. If Rising was in between MGS 2 and 4, they'd be really limited since all the cool new characters would probably have to die to explain their absence in 4, as the structure of the story would revolve around giving fans answers to questions that probably wouldn't be that interesting anyway. So Platinum Games gave themselves the freedom to tell whatever story they wanted without the shackles of a predetermined outcome. Having said that, the world, weaker nations especially, had to start over with the sudden crash of the Patriots. Raiden is employed by Maverick Security Consulting for military training, VIP security, and other duties in a small country in Africa as they've been recovering over the last 4 years. A lot of disdain for Rising on the offset came from the fact that Raiden is back in combat when Metal Gear Solid 4 showed him finally trying to live a normal life with his family. I understand this mentality, however, one, the game could still totally be good besides that, but more importantly, two, Metal Gear Solid 4's ending for Raiden was extremely flawed. As I said in the review, it was basically the exact same ending as MGS2, but the only differences were that Raiden is a self-deprecating robot and that they have a kid. Honestly though, by the end of MGS4, Raiden's connection with Rose is downright toxic. I mean, Campbell and Rose lie to Raiden, tell him that Rose had a miscarriage, pretend that the son is Campbell's as he goes out, becomes a robot with a death wish. They say it's all in them protecting him, Rose, and the baby from the Patriots, but there was absolutely no reason not to inform him of the plan, right? I mean, Ocelot pretended to fuse his personality with Liquid when he was acting the whole time. I mean, the Patriots aren't that all-knowing, right? Of course, this isn't the MGS4 review extended edition, I just wanted to vent about Raiden's ending. However, my biggest reason for enjoying Raiden's position in life at the start of Rising is because it's 2018, and with that, Solid Snake has passed away, and so it makes sense that Raiden's going to pick up the fight where Snake left off, since there will always be someone threatening the world, and so someone must always be willing to bend the rules to save the day. This was one of the lessons Raiden learned from Snake in MGS2.
Are you two really an NGO?
Insofar as we're a non-profit organization of civilians advocating a cause, yes. The cause happens to be the eradication of Metal Gear.
We work on our own, but it's a cause worth fighting for.
What you do isn't grassroots activism. It's more like terrorism.
I admit that.
I won't sit by while they butcher little kids and ship their parts around like meat. It's sick.
It's not all so simple, right? They import those brains legally. For medical purposes, it's all done.
Being legal doesn't make it right.
Now anyway, we're protecting the president of this nation, but the limo gets attacked by an army from World Marshal, led by Sundowner and the mysterious Jetstream Sam. Sundowner has a really interesting line about how the president needs to go because some people didn't want to reform after the fall of SOP. I mean, a company like World Marshal really would benefit from the war-driven economy after all. When I first played Rising, I thought this was an interesting direction to take an MGS4 follow-up in. However, it actually was established before. At the end of MGS4, Drebin told Otacon that some are suffering blowback from the end of the Patriots, questioning if it was really right to begin with. However, this was not given any depth, nor was it really explained, so it just came off like a tossed-in line at the last minute to add moral ambiguity to the action of the heroes, but failed to really leave an impact. But here, I like how we actually see who the negatively affected people were, and why. Oh, Metal Gear Ray is also here and gets wrecked by Raiden's sword. A spectacular display of how powerful the villains are now, but I just want to bring it up because Metal Gear Ray has got to be one of the funniest mechs in the series. Throughout Metal Gear Solid 2, it was given all this hype as the Rex Annihilator. Ocelot steals it, destroys the tanker, catches Solidus and the Harrier, but then Arsenal Gear turns out to be the real threat as Raiden destroys cheap Ray copies. And then a refined Ray model literally gets beaten by Rex after 9 years of decay, plus being literally blown up by Snake in MGS1. And now look at this thing, the pathetic first boss of the new game. To end the prologue, Sundowner murders the president and gets away as Raiden battles Jetstream Sam, getting totally destroyed. I mean, parrying his attacks literally results in damage to yourself, as Raiden loses an eye. I mean, geez, Solid Snake got pretty lucky for not losing an eye. I mean, this seems to happen a lot. Raiden regroups, gets a brand new robotic body that can stand up against Sam and everyone else at World Marshal as he uncovers their plan of continuing the war economy by training children's brains to fight through VR training. And so Raiden has every incentive to stop World Marshal and their backer, United States Senator Armstrong. That's basically it. Thank goodness for that. After MGS4 and Peace Walker, I'm so happy to return to a Metal Gear story that's incredibly character-driven. So like Snake Eater, let's just tackle it by talking about the characters. There's still the usual radio cast of characters helping Raiden over the codec, and I think all of them have likable personalities, whether it be Boris, this game's Colonel Campbell, with a standout moment being when he decides to help Raiden despite breaking the law towards the end of the game.
Well then. Officially, Maverick Incorporated condemns you and your actions as unlawful.
And unofficially?
I'll do all I can over the codec to help.
Courtney saves your data, Doctor aids Raiden with the tech talk, and Kevin is voiced by Phil Lamar, which makes any character better than they were before. Ultimately, these characters don't have that much depth and really don't add to the story much, although what I do like is how the flavor dialogue references previous games, like how Raiden still has an unwavering respect for Solid Snake, and I love that.
Hero of Outer Heaven, Zanzibar Land, Shadow Moses. The list goes on.
Right. Guy's a legend. I forgot you knew him so well.
Yeah, he saved my ass at Big Shell.
There are also some small tidbits about Raiden's family. He mentions that they're safe in another country at the raid of World Marshal, for example. At the very end of the game, we're reintroduced to Sunny, now at age 12, building whole jets. I mean, what else is a kid gonna do in her spare time, I guess? But it's through her that we get to hear about how Otacon's doing these days.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, he was a huge geek back when he was younger. But he really changed once he got into his 30s. Got a lot more attractive.
You think so?
But that's all I've got on the side characters. Good, but nothing mind-blowing. Raiden himself has gone through such a tragic roller coaster, but at the start of Rising, I was happy to see how content he was with himself and his job. But since this is how the story starts, it obviously quickly unravels by the end. Very early on, Raiden learns about World Marshal's plan to use orphan kids and train them to be soldiers through VR training in their brains, which is just horrific. With a detail I absolutely love is that according to Sundowner, this is known as the Sears system, as in the George Sears system. It's exactly the program that Raiden went through when he was a kid at the hands of Solidus Snake, and the villains love how much simpler it is to do this with VR training, since they don't actually have to deal with physical repercussions. Whether or not you played Metal Gear Solid 2 and know the details of Raiden's past and Solidus Snake is actually pretty irrelevant. If you have, that makes the continuity not all the better, but if you haven't, the game still allows you to relate to Raiden just as much by informing you of everything you need to know about him, all the while not spoiling MGS2 or MGS4. Raiden being reminded of his days with Solidus and seeing these helpless children resurfaces Raiden's killer instinct, Jack the Ripper. By the end of Rising, I realized that this game handles the sadness from killing in a Metal Gear game better than MGS1, better than MGS2, rivaling MGS3. When you make it to World Marshal, Jetstream Sam informs you of the fact that you're no better than anyone else working at the company since you've been slaughtering enemies like it's nothing. Raiden says that they made their choice when picking this job, and in fact he repeats this throughout the first half of the game, but this is a truly lacking in justification rationalization of the havoc he causes, since most people you fight are actually terrified of you, since they're just guys trying to make the money they need to provide for their families, but we've killed countless amounts of these guys throughout the game. So from that point on, enemies react to you verbally throughout combat, reminding you of this constantly. In one of the greatest displays of ludonarrative synchronicity I have ever seen, you really feel like Jack the Ripper, since the game makes it so fun to just slash through guys and tear their robot hearts out. In fact, it's a core mechanic that you have done numerous times throughout the game and will continue to do because it's fun. I actually think that this is the best part of the story, matched with the character of Jetstream Sam. Video games in particular have a love for rivals that aren't the main antagonist per se, but provide a foil for the hero throughout the story. In video games especially, I can see why this is. There's an inherent appeal to designing a character that is the antithesis of the hero and a boss fight that the player is incapable of winning at the beginning of the game, since it will further connect you with the character and thus encourage you to want to get as powerful as possible for that second round. Sam challenges Raiden on two fronts. There's first the physical aspect where he completely dominated Raiden, but then the second time you see him is when he drops the truth bomb I just discussed, which affects Raiden on the mental level, prepping you for the epic boss fight where you finally overcome and kill Sam. However, when you play Sam's DLC mission, his role in the game is recontextualized and is actually pretty sad, since he was trying to destroy World Marshal and Senator Armstrong just as much as Raiden does, but he got beat so badly by Armstrong that he was forced to work alongside the people he hates, ending with his death by the hands of Raiden. You just feel bad for him, even though you still actually never learn that much about the guy. The game leaves it just mysterious enough, all the while telling you plenty for you to relate to him and keep the appeal of the character intact. Early on in the game, Raiden frees one of the enemy AI robots called Blade Wolf, and after some enhancements he helps Raiden scout out areas. And I think he's a fine character. Nothing wrong with Blade Wolf, but doesn't really play into the story much or the gameplay. He also got a DLC level, but I didn't really like it nearly as much as Sam, since the VR training was kind of boring and the mission itself felt like a massive retread of previous content, which you could accuse Sam of, but his level design was just more fun. Story-wise though, you didn't really learn anything about Blade Wolf you cared to know, which is the biggest issue for me. The boss characters are actually really good in MGR. We have returned to the old formula of battling real human beings with their own lot and struggles in life, and when beating them we learn something about them, from them on their deathbeds. This sounds minor, but after Guns of the Patriots and Peace Walker especially, I'm happy to see the series treat the villains like this again. I mean, Miss Trawl is literally everything the B&Bs were trying to be in Metal Gear Solid 4, only she has a personality and speaks for herself, which is an instant improvement. But other characters like Monsoon or Sundowner have such great performances with a definitive air of unlikability that you need in a villain. Case in point, Senator Armstrong. This guy is absolutely hilarious for all the right reasons. I mean, one, he's a perfect parody of politicians, all about the approval ratings, and two, the part where you realize he's indestructible, leading to this shot where he runs at Raiden.
The hell are you thinking?
Or the part where he sends Raiden flying.
Senator!
Or the part where he punches Raiden into the Metal Gear unit itself. Ultimately, Raiden quits Maverick and goes out on his own to keep fighting. This was sad for me because of any character in a video game, the one I would want to get a happy ending the most would be Raiden, but time after time he just doesn't get it, and this is how the Metal Gear Saga ends. We don't know what he does after this, but if there was a sequel, I'd hope it'd be something positive for the guy. At the end of the day though, that's really all I have to say on the story of Metal Gear Rising. It just proves what I said in the Peace Walker review. No, your story doesn't need to pretend to be deep and philosophical to be good. Rising is probably the simplest story on paper since at Metal Gear 1, however it packed just as much heart as the greatest Metal Gear Solid plots. It was pretty goofy at times, and really took the over-the-top elements of Metal Gear and multiplied it by 10, but by providing a good story with great characters, it beats the crap out of Metal Gear Solid 4 or Peace Walker. I still feel really bad for Raiden, but thanks to MGS4, it is pretty much damned if you do, damned if you don't, since I feel bad for him in this game, but his MGS4 ending was really bad, so which would I rather have? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that Metal Gear Rising was a pretty damn good ride regardless. Okay, now I get to talk about the game. The graphics and animation in Rising are phenomenal. The environments managed to be really varied and detailed, all the while programming in 1,000,001 ways to slash through everything. But the most impressive part is that even on PlayStation 3, the version I played for this review, Metal Gear Rising almost always ran at 60 frames per second, and with action this frantic and explosive, I have to say hats off to Platinum Games for somehow figuring that out. The in-game scenes are kinda lame as Raiden just stands around walking with you being unable to see his face, probably because his lips aren't even moving. But the CG cutscenes that are mostly used to tell the story are a bit compressed, but are animated really well nonetheless. With the in-game animation, especially the Quicktime Events, really capturing the intensity of the moment. Said intensity is elevated by the game's top-of-the-line voice acting and harmonious soundtrack. Apparently there are some split opinions on the soundtrack of Metal Gear Rising, but I don't know how to describe the effect the soundtrack had on me the first time I played this game. But the lyrics, even though I can barely understand what they're saying half the time, and the instrumentals of every vocal theme in this game were just so intense. Combined with the constant sounds of swords clashing to create an experience like no other in the series that rekindled the love I had for it to begin with, despite being nothing like the rest, making every boss feel like a climactic event.
I finally found what I was looking for. A place where I can be without remorse. Because I am a stranger who is found in even stranger war. I finally found what I was looking for. The only thing I know for real, there will be
So when starting the game, the first thing I've got to compliment about it would be how the Prologue Mission uses the HUD from Metal Gear Solid 4. It's not like there's anything amazing about this in and of itself, it's just a cool tribute before the real game begins. As I stare at the script, I realize that Metal Gear Rising is a pretty simple game, all things considered. As far as the core mechanics are concerned, Raiden can jump, slash with his sword using square, and triangle is your secondary weapon. With this being an action game, the goal is to slash your way through the opposition, trying to take as little damage as possible and getting your hit combos as high as possible in the name of getting a higher rank at the end of the combat section, and then at the end of the stage. By the way, the DLC characters basically play the same as Raiden. Sam is faster with more raw power and has an excellent double jump and air dash, but that's about it. Blade Wolf just being the slowest of the bunch with a decent jump though. While using R2, Raiden will sprint, and in this mode you can't use any of your combos, but you will deflect bullets automatically, which is a good tactic to keep in mind when fighting enemies from far distances that carry guns. When sprinting, you'll also jump over obstacles automatically, which is kind of lame, but at the same time was probably done as to not clutter up the control scheme. What this game has that is unique from other action games is the parry system and blade mode. The parry system seemed clunky when I first picked up the game, however you get used to it really quickly. When locked onto an enemy and they flash red, this means that they're about to attack you, and at this moment you have a few frames to block the attack and quickly attack back. You do it by holding up on the analog stick and holding down the attack button. A mechanic that is again simple but endlessly satisfying to pull off. It's also worth mentioning that enemy attacks that are flashing yellow or some other color are unavoidable, so it's best to dodge out of the way in that case. This describing all the best parts of Rising. The ones that require precision. Look no further than Blade Mode. All three characters have this, the ability to slice through enemies and obstacles with exact movements. With this being on PS3, you have to use the right analog stick to change the direction of the sword, which is cumbersome. However, on consoles, this is basically as good as the controls can get. But I like how the ability to slice through anything never interferes with the progression of the game. I mean, there's no better example than right here at the beginning. There are the stairs, but most players will feel the natural inclination to just slice through it piece by piece and watching them fall. But have no worries since there's platforms right there to still get up nonetheless. Blade mode can also be used in combat by destroying the support beams for platforms your enemies are standing on, and that is so satisfying. When Jack the Ripper emerges in the story, you can also use this as an extra form during combat for more power. But this also depletes your blade mode ammo, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. And as I mentioned earlier, when an enemy has taken enough damage, you can line up your sword at just the right angle to lay a finishing blow and completely restore all of your health. It's also just so cool to be able to cut the exact body parts off of enemies. You know, the more I write this, the harder it is to make Rising sound like a fun game without looking like a total bloodthirsty psychopath. But anyway, in between missions, you can increase your stats, like how much health you have, how much blade mode energy you have, the stats of your weapons, or purchase new combos altogether, increasing the variety. Which, by the way, I'm glad the game gives you a decent amount of combos to start with, so that it doesn't get stale before you upgrade, and that is a problem I've encountered in beat-em-up-esque games before. There's also no pressure in the shop, since while you're there, you have to purchase these upgrades with the points you get from missions, but all transactions are refundable before starting the next mission, which is really generous. But on the subject of generosity, Metal Gear Rising is pretty easy. I played the game on hard mode, which was the highest I had unlocked when starting the recording, and except for a few embarrassing deaths where I fell off the roof in the rooftop stage, I hardly ever died, since rations are in plentiful supply, and even at that, the Blade Mode Finisher Strike makes it so that you get a full health restore regardless of what enemy it is. It wasn't until I got to Armstrong where I spent over an hour on it, but I thought this, alongside the fight with Sam, was the highlight of the entire game, since all your skills be tested, since you can't just button mash in games like these. Skill is crucial, and it was also during bosses where I realized how much this game meant to me as a Metal Gear fan, but I can expand upon that in just a moment. Bosses drop you new weapons which expand your abilities even further, with my favorite being Mistral's staff giving you a great range. I didn't get much use out of the rest of them since the acquisition of the new weapons is poorly done. You get the staff at the very beginning of the game, but don't get the Sai or Sundowner's weapon until the very end, and by that point you just want to focus on the sword and the staff since they've been getting upgraded since the beginning. I did find that the Sai worked pretty well against Jetstream Sam, but that was about it. While all these things are great and I think Rising is a great game to play, I do have a list of nitpicks I would like to see sorted out in a potential sequel. I mean, did you think we were going to get through a whole Jay's Reviews episode without complaining for over a minute at least once? None of these problems are major, but they do exist to hold me back from loving this game to its core. First, I really don't like the Quicktime Events. These are the biggest game design crutch of the 7th generation. Why craft sequences where the best players will see the cool animations when you could just have a cutscene where you press a button and something cool will happen? Rising uses these pretty sparingly, but I find them lame and overdone regardless. Take the final boss for example. During the Blade Mode sequence, I died so many times to this because it kept taking me too long to position my sword at the right angle, but with each death I kept improving, and when I actually finally did it and slashed Armstrong's head, that was satisfying. That was what video games are about. Compare that to getting the Armstrong QTE right, and it doesn't even come close to the part where I actually mastered a mechanic, because Quicktime Events never will, and this goes for every QTE in the game. Just visual eye candy when action games need none. In addition to that, I also don't like locking on in this game. It's done with the L1 button, however you can't just press L1 to switch to a different enemy. You first lock off the enemy, then lock on to another enemy, and it's just I don't really like it. I also think the menu is clunky. You can only access it with the D-pad while you're completely stationary, which is really awkward to do, and so I try not to rely on switching weapons all that often since it is intrusive. I wish you could just switch weapons on the fly, however at the same time every single button on the controller is taken in this game, so I don't blame them too much on this one. Using missiles in combat's also weak since this can't be integrated into your combos, since you have to go into a first person or third person walking mode just to shoot a missile, which kills the point of using it unless a chopper comes by, you shoot it down, and you get back to the game. Lastly, stealth is forced into this game. I mean, I guess they want to have something in common with the Metal Gear series, although it's pretty shallow since the mechanics don't feel right for slow moving. So as a result, I just slashed instead. And when I am required to be sneaky, I notice flaws like how the camera's always snapping back behind Raiden, which limits my view. The radar is there, but I just want to see around me with my own two eyes. I actually really like the part where you played as a dwarf gecko though. Like any good stealth section, you can't really fight back, so that makes the chase and the hiding more intense. But yeah, if they were to make a sequel to Rising, these would be my choices for improvement. But with that, I really don't have too much else to say on the game, so let's wrap it up. When I first completed Metal Gear Rising, I thought it was a fantastic game, like near perfect score good. After the second playthrough, I can definitely say that Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is not a 10 out of 10 game, but it is still an 8 at the very least. Playing the DMC series has shown me that yeah, Rising's not perfect, however what the game does do is provide an extremely action-packed romp in the Metal Gear universe. The action set pieces both when I first played this game and now, like when Raiden must scale down the side of a building or run up a bridge that's about to be destroyed, really get your blood pumping. The combat itself is also really good and can more than carry this game from start to finish. And if you do like it, there's plenty of bonus content to uncover as you play, which is most appreciated in an age where games come short and with hardly any content either. Like I said at the beginning, I love when franchises will cross over into other genres since it can show you something you never knew you wanted to play. Metal Gear Rising is not the best action game, but it is an incredible gateway into the genre for those who've never played other games in the style before. Even then, it will still offer something unique with Blade Mode and the Parry system. For that reason, I really enjoy Metal Gear Rising even to this day. As a Metal Gear game though, this is where the game truly shines. I say that Rising is a breath of fresh air for the series, but it really has nothing to do with what the best Metal Gear games have established, but that's a good thing. Sure, Solid Snake never cuts through a Metal Gear with a sword, but this is why Rising has such a unique identity. I totally buy this as plausible in the Metal Gear universe, and it takes that concept and runs with it. providing a good story that we can all sit down, understand, have fun with, and also sympathize with the characters. Guns of the Patriots and Peace Walker just felt so tired and dry of ideas. So cynical. But Rising, thanks to the developer shift, does not feel cynical at all, nor do they have Konami breathing down their throats like I'm sure the MGS4 and Peace Walker teams did. For that reason, I respect this game and the work Platinum Games did to do the Metal Gear name justice. And on that note, I would say this game does Metal Gear better than Kojima. Well, MGS4 onward Kojima. Since again, as I said, this game is bursting at the seams with creativity and complexity found through replayability, and that is what made this series so special to begin with. If you're a fan of this series and have avoided playing Rising, I implore you to give it a shot. You may be pleasantly surprised. I know I certainly was, since I avoided Rising, since I wasn't going to care about the action-oriented game, but here I am saying it's way better than Peace Walker, which I gave a chance way earlier than Rising by virtue of just being a standard Metal Gear game. I'm going to go so far as to say that Metal Gear Rising is one of my favorite Metal Gear games. I love it more than Portable Ops, the MSX games, and the Twin Snakes. It can't beat MGS 1 through 3, but hey, 4th place is pretty damn good. But that was Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. So we're almost done with the series now. Next time, we're going to be tackling Metal Gear Solid 5, Ground Zeroes for the PlayStation 4. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.